Everybody, please be seated. Thank you so much. So, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, this is very emotional for everybody involved. And like I said yesterday, I appreciate everyone's decorum. I know this is difficult. I know this is very hard. Obviously, the medical examiner is about to testify, and there are going to be some photos that are going to show some body parts. And so I just want everybody to continue to maintain your decorum. If you feel like you're not going to be able to, please just take a moment, step outside for a few minutes, and then come back inside, okay? Because in order to continue the proceedings, I just want to make sure we all guide ourselves accordingly, okay? All right. State's here, defense is here. Mr. Raja, the defendant, is here. Did you talk about the photos during the break, Mr. Richardson?
I called them down, so I don't have A through T anymore, I now have A through I.
A through I, and you're stipulating?
Yes.
As a composite, okay, they come into evidence, exhibit A, 10, A through I, yes?
So now, Dr. Juice, what I want to do is start with, you said he had 3 gunshot wounds, right?
Yes, he has one perforating into one penetrating the chest and 2 perforating on the right and left arms.
And when you say perforating, does perforating mean that it goes in and goes out?
Yes, there's more than one defect. There was a defect of entry made by the bullet and a defect of exit made by the bullet. Okay. And the penetrating usually is on one hole because the bullet is retained in the body.
Okay, so the penetrating means that the bullet it enters but it does not come out.
Correct.
So let's start with his first, one of the injuries to the arm. And can you see from where you are?
Yes, I can.
So now this injury is to which of his arms?
This is the left forearm.
Okay, that's the left forearm. And
Yes.
what, can you explain to the judge what, can you first of all define for us on here, what would have been the entrance wound on his left forearm here? Were you able to tell where the bullet would have entered?
Yes.
Okay, where would it?
Well, an entrance wound is different from an exit wound.
Hold on one second, Ms. Ellis.
Do you have the other picture? Yeah. Okay, let me see something. Okay. All right.
Okay, you can continue at this time, sure.
So now, the injury to his left arm, you said that you were able to determine where the entrance wound would have.
Yes. Yes, this is one of the wounds, but that's not the entrance. The entrance is more posterior on the arm.
Okay, I'm going to show you what is going to be, what is a composite of 10B. Now this is his left arm still here, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, even though we're looking at the same arm, but we're looking at it in different angles, right? So what are we looking at? Are you able to tell us which one of these wounds would have been entrance and exit?
I have to say that the pictures do not reflect what I am actually reading and seeing on my diagram.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, if you have any other pictures of the left forearm, can I see them?
I don't have any other pictures of the left forearm here. Do you have a diagram in your?
I have a diagram here. Correct. And this is the diagram that I have. When the bullet entered, it entered more toward the medial aspect of the forearm. In other words, if you don't mind taking the diagram and putting it down, putting it on here, I can show where it is, because the exit wound was more or less of a composite it wasn't just one hole, because the bullet, when it entered the arm, it fractured the bones in the arms and fragments exited separately and made more than one hole when the bullet came out.
Okay.
So we didn't have an entire bullet coming out. We had fragments of bullet, fragments of bone coming out of his arm.
Okay, all right. So as the bullet is traveling through his left arm, what happens is the bullet, as it's going through his arm, there are it's actually breaking up into fragments, and so you have, the injuries here are what you would define as bullet fragments exiting his arm.
Correct, but you know, there is distortion in the arm. If you don't mind, I can come down and show you what I'm looking at here.
I don't think we have a pointer, but you can just use your pen.
Did it just turn off?
Just, if you can watch the cord, please. Doctor, someone just watch the cord.
Okay, so report, Dr. Jesus. Okay, yeah.
Okay, the arm is folded here, and what you're looking at is you can see here, in this area, I don't know if you want anybody else to see.
No, just the judge and the assistant.
You're looking at a hole here. This hole is basically, if you keep your arm straight, and you have the elbow here, I've folded the elbow so you can see, more or less. The injury is more on the posterior here aspect of the arm. So if you have the arm straight, close to this is the joint, and this is a hole made by the bullet. That's the entry. It's a typical straight entry. What you're looking at here is a defect made by a fractured bone. You can see the fragment of bone coming out of it. So when the bullet went in, it essentially shattered the other bones in the forearm, shattered both of the bones. And then when it came out, it made those irregular defects. So this is not made essentially by the bullet per se, but by a fractured bone. These fragments irregularly made by bones in fragment of bullets.
Okay.
So it came out from the back of the arm like that. It came out essentially to the side, almost to the front.
Okay. So now, did you say this was the
This is the entrance.
the entrance? I'm sorry, this is the entrance?
So but this is a little twisted, but that would be the entrance wound.
Okay.
So,
All right.
but
And
the
that
arm
is to,
in here.
okay, and that is to the back. That is basically, as you're standing postured like that, that would be to his left arm.
Correct.
The
Yes,
back.
back or below the
Okay. And would that be consistent with, let's say he's running and he's running away from someone shooting at him, and if someone is shooting at him and he's running away, and someone shoots him in the back of the arm, would that injury be consistent with that?
It's consistent, and again, as you can see, this is going from back slightly to the front, but lateral. So in other words, the bullet came from the back, but it came out almost to the side of the arm. So if he's running and someone shoots at him from the right and the back, that's the trajectory you expect the bullet to take.
Okay. Now, I want to go to the right arm. Now, what are we looking at? about is that entry wound to his right arm. This would be right here. Okay. So now, this was a perforating gunshot wound, right? Good. So this is the entrance, and then this photograph here, is that the exit? That's the exit. Okay. And that's his right arm, right? Okay. And if he's running, and someone is running alongside of him and shooting at him, and his right side is exposed, is this consistent with him being shot in the right side, in that right arm?
This is not the entrance room.
I'm sorry.
This is the exit one.
Right. But let's say he turns.
Back of his
Right.
Right. So both entrances is on the back.
Right.
So he has the entrance one on the left side that is below the elbow and in the back. And he has the other entrance one in the back closer to his armpit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it came out also in the front.
Okay, all right. And so that wound, that entrance wound, the one that we just saw a few minutes ago, this one here, that one right there.
Correct.
If
You can
it's,
see how we had to leave where we are essentially to show the way.
okay. And if he is running, and if he is trying to protect himself from gunfire, is that consistent with him putting his arm up and trying to protect himself if someone is shooting at him? Would that be consistent with that?
And doctor, I need you to use the microphone when you testify, just so I can pick it up, okay? I know you got a lot over there.
Yes. Well, arms can be in various positions. It looked like he has this wound going downward in his arm, but that doesn't mean he was shot from top to bottom. The arm may have been up when he's shot. So with the bullet going from here and coming out this way,
Okay. So that would be consistent if somebody is shooting doing like that.
that could be consistent.
Miss Ellis and Mr. Richardson, can I see you up here just for a second, please, just briefly? Thanks.
Okay. Dr. Juice, you can come back over here. Okay, so now I want to move to the other gunshot wound. And this would be the third gunshot wound. And I'm not saying third because were you able to determine the order of the gunshot wounds? Okay, so you can't say which one came first, which one came second, and which one came third.
I was asked those questions before, and we had.
Well, let me ask it to you this way. In terms of the arms, and when I'm talking about the arms, you can't say which arm was shot first, which arm he received the gunshot wound in first.
No, we usually.
You got, I'm sorry, you have to use the microphone.
I'm sorry, we don't usually, it's not easy to determine when somebody is shot more than once, which one. It can happen. We have had cases where we are able to say this was last or this must have been first. But in most cases, we cannot tell the order of the gunshot wounds.
Okay. And as it relates to the arms, and specifically talking about his arms, you are not able to determine which one was first or second.
No.
Okay. So now we're looking at the gunshot wound to his chest. Now that would have been on the right side of his chest?
Correct.
Okay. And are we looking at the entrance wound here?
This is the entrance wound close to the nipple.
Okay. And can you tell the judge what was the trajectory, the path that the bullet took once it entered Corey's body?
The bullet went through
tissues of the right side of the chest. Then it went through the right lung of Mr. Jones, then went through his upper part of his heart. Then it continues toward the left and to the left lung. Then it went to the left side of the chest, in the area of the armpit, and it entered the left arm area.
Okay. Now, this gunshot wound to the chest, was this the fatal wound?
Yes.
And when you say that this is the fatal wound, what was it about this wound that caused Corey's death?
Well, Corey's death is due to this gunshot wound passing through both of his lungs and the upper part of his heart, causing stoppage of circulation and eventually the heart and death.
Okay. So I want to show you another photograph. Now, this is obviously a picture of his heart, right?
Yes.
Now, can you tell the judge what we're looking at here?
We're looking at the heart of Corey Jones as it was removed from his body. We put it on a table and we photographed it because the injuries were such that you could see after the right lung, essentially the heart is really juxtaposed very close to the right lung over here in the left lung. It's right in the middle. So after it passed to the lung, it took that part of the heart. This is what we call the atrium, right side. The heart has 4 chambers, and this is where the delineation between the ventricles, where the very thick part of the muscle of the heart is, and the top portion where it's thinner, and it's mostly, you know, for low pressure blood. So that part was ripped apart, where I'm showing here. And then this is the aorta. What I'm going over here, we cut through it, the aorta being a big vessel. Here is the pulmonary artery. So what we're looking at are 2 big vessels. One, this one is on top of, comes out on top of this one. But it's coming from the right side here. This is the pulmonary area. This is a flap. That whitish part is a flap because that big vessel is lacerated. And this flap on the picture just shows you that there is a big segment of the blood vessel that is lacerated or blown out. And so it's just flap over. And this is the aorta. This is the aorta. The aorta is supposed to be uniformly looking like here, from here to here. Once you get here, you can see the aorta is lacerated and completely from the base of the heart all the way here, blown out, blown up.
And this picture here, is this pretty much, is this just a different angle of what you just told Your Honor in terms of the aorta being blown out, lacerated and blown out?
Yes. This is essentially the same picture, a little bit bigger because we took it closer to the top. And it shows the tissues that you're looking at raw. It's essentially tissue that's been blown away by the bullet. And this is the tube of the aorta, which is the big blood vessel that comes out. The aorta essentially comes from the left side of the heart over here. And then as it comes out, it passes under the pulmonary artery. So it may look like it's on the right and this one is on the left, but this one is essentially coming from the right side of the heart. It just goes over the aorta that started on the left and goes under it.
Okay. So now when you say, so this part here, like all of this, that's missing.
Yeah, this is all missing.
So
And this one also is missing, completely blown out.
completely blown out.
So as the bullet passes through, it tears up the aorta here and continues under there and took the pulmonary artery. You can see that looking tachyc is because bullet continues on this side under and then took the pulmonary artery that's here.
And these last two photographs here. Now this is,
Can you flip it? We're looking at the right lung and the left lung. We have this area here is where, you know, the windpipe divides and goes into the right side. It divides and goes into the left side. And anything else around here are blood vessels. That big blood vessel that you saw, that I call the pulmonary artery on top of the aorta, it divides into two branches, one going to your lung, right lung, one going to the left lung. So essentially, when you blow this aorta, this blood vessel, those two lungs don't receive much blood. Blood really stops going into the lungs.
and which means at that point he can't breathe.
At that point, it can bring air into his lung. But the air is not breathing much oxygen because it doesn't have much blood going into the lungs.
Okay, all right.
And the main function of the lung is actually for air exchange, to bring oxygen into your body.
Okay. Now this last photograph, is that right side of Dr. Juice?
This is the same organs that you're looking at, but we flip them. So you can see more holes in them. There are some holes that do not show here because we are looking at them from the inside. The way they sit, you're mostly on your back. So this is essentially looking at the back of the lungs, right and left. This is the right one, this is the left one. That's what we're looking at here. And from this side, you can see the injury. Here you can see a small injury. When you flip it, you see, you know, how lacerated.
That was going to be my next question, which is where in the lungs that we're looking at right now, as the bullet is traveling through his body, where in the lung does it create, where is the injury from the bullet?
The bullet travels, this is what we call, this lung has three lobes, superior, middle, and inferior lobe. Those lobes are really close to each other, so it took the middle and superior here on that side.
Okay. When you say it took it, what does that mean?
That means it passed through both of the middle and superior lobe.
Okay.
And then from here, after passing through the heart, then it hit the left lung, passing right here, see you have two lobes, 1, 2. But when you flip it, you can see that it has gone here and all the way to the back of the lung. That's from the inside where it's actually facing the heart here. If you put those two together, in the middle is the heart here.
So you got this bullet that travels through the lung, goes up through the aorta, this pulmonary artery, and blows the aorta out,
Correct.
and blows the pulmonary artery out,
Correct.
and damages his lung. Damages his lung.
Correct.
Okay, you can have a seat, Dr. Juice. Thank you.
We'll grab
Now-
it. That's okay. Here you go.
Dr. Juice, are you aware of what caliber of weapon or bullet this was that entered Corey's body?
If I remember well, it was from a Glock 45.
Okay. Does a Glock 40 sound familiar?
So I'm not familiar with the weapon, but I know that's what was reported.
Okay, all right. So now when we're are you familiar with caliber of bullets?
Well, I suppose part of my training, I have to learn about bullets and guns and ammunitions and damages made by bullets and by firearms.
Okay. So now when if we're talking about, let's say, a .22 caliber or a 32 caliber or a 38 caliber, and a 40 caliber. Are you familiar with the differences in sizes of those calibers of bullets?
Well, you know, bullet caliber is one thing, but the firearm is also very important. I mean, the ammunition is important, but because bullets are going to be fired, it all depends on the power, how powerful, you know, that bullet comes out of a firearm. You have a 22 caliber rifle, for example, you know, with a lot of powder in it, firepower. And you have large handguns such as the 45 and even magnum ammunitions that fire really more powerful firings.
Now, the bullet that you took from Corey's body, was that bullet large in size? Was it?
It was I would say, large bullet. We have photographs of the bullet, and it was not a small bullet.
Okay. And so when he is hit in the chest and the bullet travels through his body and it blows out the aorta and the pulmonary artery and damages the lung, how long would you say that he is going to be able to survive?
Well, this is a pretty fatal wound. We don't talk in terms of immediately fatal with bullet wounds that go to the heart. Immediately fatal means that the minute that person incurred the injury, there is cessation of vital function, meaning if you get a bullet wound to say part of your brain that control your heart rate, control your respiration, and all what we call autonomic functions, that injury, whether it's a bullet or it's a cut of your brain at that point, it's what we call an instantly fatal wound. And we've seen those injuries, and if asked, I have no problem telling you it's an instantly fatal wound. That person didn't know anything the minute that injury occurred. That's it. With bullets to the heart, they may or may not be immediately fatal.
Let's talk about this case. So now in Corey's case, once he received the bullet to the heart, is he going to drop immediately?
From what I understand, and I want to address only this case, from what I understand, Corey Jones was in motion as he's being shot at. So I do not expect him to just get the gunshot and drop right there. I expect him to keep moving for a very short period of time and distance.
All right. And let me just stop you right there. I want to show you a diagram that the defense has. And I'll put this up. Here. Can you see that, Dr. Hughes?
I do.
Can you come down
I do.
just one more time, please?
Angie, we need the microphone, please. Thanks. No, that's okay.
So now this is a diagram, and if we look here, this is where Corey's body is. You see that?
Yes.
And we look here, it says Raja during second volley of shots. So now you were shown, you've seen some photographs in this case, correct?
Correct.
And you're aware that there were two sets of volleys in this case, correct?
Correct.
And so the last set of three are located right here in this area. So now, if Corey is hit right here, if the defendant shoots him with either number 4, number 5, or number 6 bullet, right here, and based on Corey already being in motion from his car, which is up in here, and his body came to rest right here, in your expert opinion, where would you expect Corey to be, to land, once he received the gunshot wound to his chest?
You haven't given me a scale. I'm looking at a picture, but you haven't given me distance. From what I was told and before in this case.
I'll give you some distance. Let me give you some distance. So from where his pistol is located, which is right here, and his body is right here, is about 41 yards. So if he's shot in the chest, that fatal wound hits him right here, where that pistol is located, can he travel 41 yards?
As I was saying before, if somebody's motion, they are going to keep moving. So he's not going to just receive the gunshot wound and then just drop like a sack of potato. So he will keep moving. However, 41 yards is quite a distance. And I do not believe, I would say no, he could not have covered such a long distance. Given the injuries that I observed, I do not believe and I do not think he traveled 41 yards.
Okay. And so we know that his body is right here. So based on what you know, do you have an opinion as to where he shot in the chest, based on where his body landed?
Well, he's shot between here and there, but closer to where his body is.
Okay. And you say he shot closer to where his body is because of what?
Because of what I observed and the injury that I observed. Cohesion was in motion. Cohesion is when he received this injury to his pulmonary artery and his aorta, he has total loss of pressure. It's almost an instant collapse of his cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system needs the blood to stay in the blood vessels. And once you cut that off, it's like cutting, I would say, a hose under pressure. The blood will flow out immediately, and essentially that hose became flat.
Okay.
So he's running a few yards because he still have a little bit of oxygen in his brain, but the exercise itself consumes a whole lot of oxygen. When you're in motion, your muscles consume extreme amount of oxygen. At this point, that reserve of oxygen is going to be consumed like 1 to 3, and he's not going to go 41 yards. There is no way he's going to make it.
He's going to make it at most what?
A few yards.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Judge, may I have a moment, please?
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
You were-
Okay, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Doctor. We met before when we took your deposition, you recall.
Yes.
Let me ask you just a few questions about your testimony here today. You are aware, aren't you, that after you performed the autopsy in this case, that the Office of the State Attorney sent your autopsy report, photographs, and your investigators' reports to 2 other forensic pathologists in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Okay. And you know Dr. John Thogmartin?
I've met him.
He's a medical examiner over on the west coast of Florida.
Where?
And you know Dr. Stephen Nelson?
Yes.
He is a medical examiner in the Lakeland area.
I've met him,
They're both highly respectable medical examiners.
I would say.
Yes?
Yes,
Okay. And you are aware that both Dr. Thogmartin and Dr. Nelson have reviewed your autopsy report, findings, and photographs, and they disagree with you
I know.
as to your opinion as to how far Mr. Jones could have traveled from the time that he received the chest wound.
Correct.
All right. Now, have you reviewed their depositions?
I have.
Okay. Now, the prosecutor asked you about a scenario where the right arm wound, how it might have been sustained. I think she said if someone were running alongside Mr. Jones as he received that right arm shot, you said that that was consistent with that?
I don't believe that was the question regarding the right arm.
Okay. You are aware that there are two groupings of casings in this case?
Yes,
Okay. And are you aware that there's expert testimony that the person who fired those shots was stationary when
correct.
when the two volleys were fired?
Yes.
Okay. So that is not consistent with someone running alongside Mr. Jones?
I would say there is a movement from the first volley to the second.
But no shooting between the first and the second? But no shooting between the first volley and the second?
That's the evidence.
Okay. Now, with regard to the chest wound, you would agree that that chest wound had to have been received when Mr. Jones' right side of his body was facing the person who was holding the gun?
Yes.
Also, you would agree that his right arm would have to be up and out of the way of the area on the right side of the torso where he was shot?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be up, but it
can
has
be out
to be
of the
away.
way. Okay, it
Correct.
can be up,
It could be up, it could be front.
or it could be back,
It
or it
could
could
be
be
any
down.
other way, but it cannot be covering the area.
Right, okay.
Because if you put the arm in the normal anatomic position, then the arm would have been hit
Correct.
by that bullet also.
So we agree that the arm was not in front of the wound where the chest wound.
Correct, it was away.
Okay? And you do not have an opinion as to what position Mr. Jones' body was in when he received any of these wounds, do you?
Well, I was told that he was running from one position from his car to where his body was. So I know he wasn't sitting, I know he wasn't on his back, or
Well, what
there are some position I know he wasn't on.
Well, what I'm talking about, because of the dynamics of the situation and because the body can move very, very quickly from one position to another, you are not in a position to tell us in what anatomical position he was in when he received any of these wounds.
I know he was standing.
Standing?
At least he was on his 2 feet
Okay, other than that?
and running away from where the officer was standing.
Well, when you say running away, you just testified that the right torso wound was when Mr. Jones, the right side of his body was facing the person who was holding the gun. Didn't you just say that?
The right,
The right side of Mr. Jones' body was facing the person who was holding the gun when he received the
it
gunshot into
has
the
to
chest.
have been. That's
Yes.
where the bullet entered.
Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean he was running away when he received that wound, does it?
Well, that's at least what I receive as far as information, that he was in motion.
In motion, but not necessarily running away.
Well, it's just semantic. He wasn't standing straight as far as the information that I
He
received.
could have been turning to face the person who was shooting him, couldn't
He
he?
could have been turning just to look for that person too. So
have been turning
I
to
don't know. He may have been turning away to see where the person is. So his body could have been going the direction where his body is found, but also turning. Yes.
He could have also been turning and facing and holding his hand up, his right hand up with a gun in his hand, couldn't he?
Well, the evidence for the right arm does not support his hand be extended toward that person. Because if he's if he's turned around and his arm is extended toward that person, I don't expect the trajectory to be where I found it.
His arm could have been up like this.
Yes, but then what you have is somebody who's standing and whose arm is up. It's a trajectory that's going to take, when we put the arm down, a very down direction. Because if you have your arm up and somebody shoots at you, the arm can go various level. So depending on where the person is and where he's holding the gun, the bullet wound would be entering in such a way, because the arm is, you have that person with the right side of his body facing the person who's shooting, with the arm up. You expect a certain angle in the arm, which I did not see. I don't see an angle, because when the arm is extended and somebody is next, lateral to you, and that bullet is going to be shot, it's not going to enter in an almost, I would say, straight fashion as I saw it in here. I didn't see. We have what we call in an entry wound a marginal abrasion. The marginal abrasion usually tells us the direction of the bullet. So if your hands are up and somebody shoots at you, it's very possible that the bullet can enter, and come out the way it did. But then you would have to have a marginal abrasion that tells you that that arm was extended in that direction when the bullet is fired. I don't know if I explained myself well. Let's say that your arm is here and somebody is to your right. The person is to your right and behind you and shoots at you. Unless that person is lower than you and aiming up, you're going to have a wound that's going to be almost straight, coming from the back, where the person who's shooting is, going toward the front where the bullet is exiting. And again, like even though the arm can be moved, various direction, the bullet is coming at an angle depending on where it's going to enter the body at a certain angle depending on where the position of the arm is. And since I didn't have that type of marginal abrasion, I cannot say that his arm was up.
You don't know where his arm was?
I don't know exactly where his arm was, but based on where the bullet, the characteristic of the entry gunshot wound, it's unlikely, that the bullet came at a very steep angle into his arm.
But if he was holding his arm up like this, wouldn't that account for the angle?
No, I described this wound of the upper arm as back to front and slightly downward. The entrance wound was situated 17 inches below the top of his head, and the exit was just 17 3/4 inches below the top of his head. So it's 3/4 inches difference.
Okay.
So it's not a steep angle.
No, but what if he's holding his arm up and he's leaning towards the left?
There are so many various positions that can be, so
You can't say.
correct.
Okay. Now, you testified about your opinion as to how far Mr. Jones would have been able to travel once receiving the chest wound. And isn't it true that you can't point to any literature or pathology book or article or anything authoritative that would help us understand how you reached that opinion? Correct?
Would you repeat the question?
Yes. You can't point to any literature, pathology book, article, or anything authoritative that would help us understand how you reached that opinion, can you?
Which opinion?
The opinion that you stated that he could not travel 41 yards.
Well, I am not, I don't think there is going to be any kind of literature or authoritative writing that would explain that. This is a particular type of, when you receive wounds, you have various type of gunshot wounds that can occur. What they describe usually are injuries caused by various firearm, depending on where they are, characteristics of them, depending on the actual quality of the firearm, the extent of injuries that they can cause. I don't think you're going to find authoritative figures that will tell you that a certain gunshot wound through the pulmonary blood vessels are going. What you're going to find out is literature that will tell you what happened when somebody bleeds. And you will find literature, and it's all over textbooks of anybody who's gone to medical school, who has taken physiology, who has taken anatomy, who has taken all the, what you call the, various, we call matière in French, all the various etaps, steps that you go through studying, to explain how the body functions, that will, it's all over the literature. So you don't,
Hold on one second. Okay. I'm sorry, doctor.
you don't really need somebody to tell you to write about what happens when somebody receives a gunshot wound in particular, because loss of blood by gunshot wound, by stab wound, by any other means is loss of blood. It's how fast you lose it, how you lose it, where it comes from, and the mechanism by which you lose it.
Well, when I asked you that question at your deposition, I think your answer was, we don't need an article or a book.
That's exactly what I answered today. We don't need, you see, authoritative literature. We don't really need that. We already understand the physiology of the body and how it works when you lose blood, and when you lose it rapidly. And when you are, when the body is in motion, and when the body is working and muscles are consuming oxygen, every doctor knows that. That's what you learn in medical school.
You read Dr. Nelson's report,
I read his report.
and you know that Dr. Nelson in his report cited numerous articles and studies to support his opinion, didn't you?
I saw his articles, and his articles have to be there because he's writing a report. However, as I explained it, I don't know if I did explain it in my deposition, not all gunshot wounds are the same. Dr. Nelson said somebody who was shot through the heart can run 41 yards. I do not disagree with that. Where in the heart are the shot? And with what type of weapon are they shot? You have a heart, and I brought one here if anybody wants me to explain. You can have a bullet wound go through the heart and make 2 holes. That person is going to be losing blood through those holes. And the muscle being a contractile kind of organ, every time the heart pumps, some of the blood will come out. But the blood vessel will be able to still bring blood into the heart until you have lost enough blood to cause the collapse of your cardiovascular system. In this particular case, you don't have 2 small holes in the muscle of the heart. You have a cut through the big blood vessels that actually has to bring the blood back into the heart, or take it out to push it into your heart, the rest of your body to give you oxygen. It's a big difference. I saw the literature that he put in his report, and I don't think they apply at all to this particular case.
My question then to you is, when I asked you in deposition if you could point us to any literature, pathology book, article, or anything like that, you said, no, we don't need anything like that. We don't need a book to tell us that.
No, we don't need a book to tell us what happened to Corey Jones.
So there was nothing that you could point to that would tell us.
No,
that
that doesn't mean I
opinion.
couldn't put. If I look, I would find literature that referred to gunshot wounds to the heart. And I read this article, and I read all the references that he provided. And to be honest with you, there is not one of these articles that come close to compare to the wounds that Corey Jones sustained. They are not comparable.
And you couldn't point us to one article that supported your opinion, could you?
At the time of the
Deposition?
deposition, no, I couldn't point to it, but I'm sure Dr. Nelson, if you had asked him, during the deposition, he probably would not have one also. He had to do some search. When you are writing a paper, you do a search of the literature to see what's in there. And those cases that are published, one of which that dated to the 1804, I believe it was, another one was in the 1970s. Those are rare cases that are in the literature for a reason. Because most people think that once you receive a gunshot wound to the heart, you're going to drop and die. And they have found that there are people who have gunshot wounds to the heart who find a way to move around and have activities. So, hey, we need to write about that. Those are very, curiosity, essentially. And, like I said, the location and the bullets that made those wounds, there is no comparison with this case.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Sure.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Ellis?
Just real quick, Judge. Dr. Juice, Mr. Richardson said that you can't point to any literature that supports your opinion that Corey Jones could not have run 41 yards. Can
That was the
you point
question.
to the condition of his heart when you performed the autopsy on him?
Yes, I have been doing this job for 20 years. I spent 9 full years in Washington, D.C., doing autopsies, 300 a year, most of which, I would say a good percentage of which, 15 to 20% of which, some years, were gunshot wounds. And I have seen gunshot wounds, to numerous cases of gunshot wounds. I've gone to scenes of death and I've reviewed videos of people who died with a gunshot wound to the heart. I have countless cases where people receive a gunshot wound to the heart, even though it makes 2 holes to their heart, just like I described and some of the literature described. They don't go further than I hear to the table.
Okay.
Some of them fall down pretty quickly.
Okay, so in the case of Corey Jones, and just talking about his heart, you said his aorta was blown out, his pulmonary artery was blown out, his heart was basically blown apart.
Correct.
So what you have to point to instead of literature is the fact that you yourself performed the autopsy on Corey Jones's heart.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's correct.
So you don't need any literature.
I don't need the literature. It's not that I cannot find the literature also, but I am at the deposition, and if you ask me if I have any literature, I would have to stop this, go on the line and check for the literature. Literature, when you need it, you check for it. You look for it. It's not right there at your disposition or in your head. Oh, I remember that I read 10 papers about it or 20 papers about it. We know that there are literature out there. And those are literature that I have seen. And I know that people who are shot in the heart, I have had cases where people are shot to the heart, and they were on a few logs. Okay. And it all depends on what they are shot with, and where in the heart they are shot.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I just have a couple questions. So, Doctor, the fatal gunshot wound, which was right here would you say it's on the right side of the chest, or
Yeah.
would you say, it's like right over here, under the armpit?
No, it was close to the nipple.
Okay. Do you have an opinion as to why that gunshot wound did not exit the body? It didn't exit the body, correct?
It did not exit the
Okay.
body.
Do you have an opinion as to why? Is it due to, and I asked the other doctor this too, is it due to the close range of the shot? Is it due to the kind of the bullet? Can you opine?
It's mostly because of the kind of the bullet. You have gunshot wounds in the arm and they came out, but you have to look at the distance that they travel.
Both traveled really. The one on the right arm didn't even break the bone, so that means it went to soft tissue and rapidly exited the body. Over here, also, you have an arm that is not very thick, so this bullet could have stayed because it hit the bone, so it could have fragmented. And in fact, I don't know if I did find anything. Sometimes it's tiny fragments. But the ones in the body, those bullets the police shoot, they are made to stay in the body. The reason I think they design this bullet that way is so that, they don't come out and hit other people when the police is shooting at other people. They are made to cause maximum damage inside of the body and stay in the body.
Okay. Now, there's been some other testimony about Corey Jones leaning back during the fatal gunshot wound to the chest. Do you have any opinion as to whether he was leaning back? Anything about him leaning back?
No, I don't have any information about that.
Okay. And about the being able to travel 41 yards or a few yards, and I asked the other doctor this too. I mean, does it depend on a number of factors? Does it depend on, the fitness of the individual, the age of the individual, the weight of the individual? I know it depends on where the bullet goes, but does it also depend on some other characteristics of the actual person as to what they could potentially do after that type of gunshot wound?
Yes, as I explained, people who are shot in the heart can have holes in the heart that are leaking blood, essentially. But the heart is still able to pump. And so that means there's still blood flowing through their body. I'm talking in this particular case of total shutdown of blood going to the brain, going to the arm, and to the legs. The reason I said he can still move is because he's already in motion. But if he wasn't in motion, I don't see this guy walking or moving forward. And 41 yards is quite a distance. I don't know the size of this room, but someone told me it's about 15 yards. So just imagine 3 times the length of this when you have no blood coming out of your heart. And you were in movement. That means your body was already consuming whatever left oxygen that was left in the blood vessels. It's being consumed at a very rapid rate. So to go from where you were shot and run the distance of the 3 lengths of this room, impossible. That's my opinion. It's not possible for anybody. You have to take into consideration how the body functions. The body needs the oxygen, especially since he was in motion. When you're exercising, that's why your heart beats very quickly. The heart beating that increases as you are in motion is to deliver oxygen to your body as quickly as possible because you consume it so fast.
Okay. State and defense, any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you so much, doctor. You can step down. Thank you. State?
Stay rest, Your Honor. Done.
Okay. State and defense, let me see you up here. We can talk about what we're going to do next. And Brittany, on that note, you have these pictures, because I have duplicate copies. And you have these? 1H? Yes, correct. Okay, Mr. Lubin, what would you like to do, sir?
We'd like to call him, and we can do it in 5 minutes, and then whatever the cross is.
I can figure which witness they're going to call, Your Honor. We object. Okay, this is about our burden. We met our burden. With the testimony they're going to bring out is something they already cross-examined Sergeant Sprague about.
Who are you calling?
We would call Deputy Arlada, who will contradict Sprague, who testified that he had a conversation. He's now testified that he had a conversation with Raja at the scene.
Okay, I'll allow it, but you have to get it done in 10 minutes. We have to be done by 6, please. Thank you. doubt in my mind you can get it done in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, sir, good afternoon. State your full name, please, sir.
Nicholas Thomas Arlotta,
Spell the last name, please.
Arlotta.
Go ahead.
Officer Arlotta, where are you employed?
Palm Beach Gardens Police Department,
How long have you been employed there?
a little over 5 years.
What's your current assignment?
Road Patrol?
And have you had any previous assignments?
No.
Okay. On October the 18th, 2015, what was your assignment?
Road Patrol
And what were your duties that evening?
to serve and protect the community.
All right. Just prior to the incident involving Officer Raja, where were you?
The Marriott Hotel off of RCA Boulevard.
Okay. And what type of call was that?
I believe it was a unwanted guest or a fight that was occurring over there.
Okay. When you arrived at the Marriott, where did you park your car?
I'm not sure where I parked it, to be honest with you, but it was at the front of the hotel.
Okay. Were other officers there as well?
Yes.
Who was there?
I couldn't tell you exactly who was there.
That's fine. How were you alerted to the call involving Raja?
We got a tone out on the radio.
And what's an alert tone?
Alert tone, emergency tone, letting the other officers know that something of importance is about to come out on the radio and we all need to listen up.
Okay. Did you respond to Officer Raja's location?
Yes, I did.
When you arrived in the scene, what did you see?
I saw the white van at the off-ramp of I-95 for the southbound off-ramp at PGA Boulevard, and I saw Officer Raj on the driver's side of the van.
Okay. Were there any other police cars in front of you when you arrived?
I don't believe so.
Where was Officer Raja?
He was on the driver's side of the white panel van.
Okay, did you stop your car someplace?
I did.
Where'd you stop it?
At the rear of the van next to it,
Okay. How close to the van you think you parked, if you remember?
maybe a few feet.
Okay. Was there enough room for another car to come in between you and the van?
No,
Who was the next officer you saw?
that'd be Sergeant Sprague.
Was Sergeant Sprague on foot or was he in his police vehicle?
I can only say that I saw him in his police vehicle.
Okay. What, if anything, about his arrival do you remember?
The lights and siren of his vehicle were still on.
And why do you remember that?
I remember that because I told him to turn off his siren.
Okay. And once he turned off the siren, what did he do next?
He told me, and I quote, to get the fuck out of the way.
Okay. And when you backed your car up, did you back your car up?
I did.
All right. And then what did he do?
He proceeded up the off-ramp.
All right. And what did you do next?
I provided lethal cover on the passenger side engine block of the vehicle.
Okay. And what direction was Sergeant Sprague's car facing?
It'd be northbound.
And which side were you on then?
I would be on the eastbound side of the car,
At the passenger side window?
passenger side window.
Okay. And did you see Sergeant Sprague get out of his car once he pulled through?
I never saw him get outside the vehicle while I was on scene.
Okay. After you stood at the passenger side window, what did you guys do next?
We went up the off-ramp.
Okay. Were you communicating with the sergeant through the window?
Yes.
Once you got to the stop point, wherever you stopped up the ramp, what happened next?
We stopped, and then I was directed to go get the TK4.
Okay. And then did you in turn leave?
I did.
Did you come back to the scene at some point?
I did.
And what happened when you got back to the scene?
I spoke with Sergeant Sprague and asked him where I should position myself, and I was directed to go to the top of the off-ramp to help with traffic control.
But by that time, they had found Mr. Jones already?
Yes.
Okay. So when you got there, you saw him in his car, you went up the ramp, and as far as you know, he never got out of his car?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. Excuse me. No further questions.
Okay, Cross?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Officer, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you have a 100% clear recollection of everything that happened that night, sir?
Not 100%, no.
When you arrived on scene, you say that you met Sergeant Sprague, he was in his vehicle?
Sergeant Sprague was in his vehicle. That I can only say that he was in his vehicle because when I came up, the only time that I ever turned around was to tell him to turn the siren off. So I couldn't tell you if he was out of his vehicle at any point before that because I was looking for a suspect.
You don't know if Sergeant Sprague was out of his vehicle before that?
Well, when I came on the scene, I'm looking for a suspect so I could see where Officer Raj is at, okay? And at that point, from my training and experience that if he's providing himself cover on the driver's side of the van, that I'm to be looking on the south side or north side of the van, okay? Assuming that he's providing himself with cover utilizing the van.
So when Sergeant Sprague arrived, do you know if he got out of his car or not? Because you're focused on obviously covering the defendant?
Correct. That's I'm more so focusing on the rest of the scene for scene safety and the safety of everyone else around us.
So Sergeant Sprague could have gotten out of his car and gotten back in, you don't know?
I wouldn't know.
And also, you're directed to go get in your car and back it up, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know if Sergeant Sprague got out of his car at that time while you were going to your car and backing it up?
I don't know.
So there's another time that he could have gotten out of his car and done something, you just don't know.
I wouldn't be able to answer yes or no.
Very good. And also, you left the scene, correct?
I did.
And you don't know any conversation Sergeant Sprague would have had with the defendant while you're gone from the scene?
I do not.
You weren't there?
I wasn't there.
So 3 different times that Sergeant Sprague could have had conversations with the defendant that you don't know about because you're focused on your job and your task at hand?
It's possible, but I couldn't say yes or no.
Yes, sir. No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Redirect. Thank you so much, sir. You can sit down.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No further witnesses from the state of the defense, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So as we talked about at sidebar, closing arguments are going to be submitted to me in writing within the week, so by May 14th. And then after that, I will provide a written order as is required by law.
So I take it that there won't be written rebuttals, we'll just submit our closing arguments?
I think you both can just, submit a closing argument. Just, we don't need, just one closing argument and then one closing argument, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is that-
Responses?
Doesn't need to be responses. I mean, if you feel like you need a response, you can, file a motion. I'll determine if we need another, if I need something else.
1 week from today.
1 week from today, please. So closing arguments are due May 14th. We don't need to, you don't need to set it down that day. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set another status. I'll have an order done within 30 days. And I will find you a status date in a moment.
I think 1 week is May 15th, not the 14th. Correct?
Correct. You are correct. By the 15th, you are accurate. Hang on a second. June 18th at 1:15
And I'm sorry, you said June 18th, Your Honor?
is a final status, yes.
I'm not in town on that date. Can we do it the week before, possibly?
I'm just in a trial the week before.
Or actually, I can't do it the week before, I'm sorry. Okay.
What about later on that week?
Ms. Ellis is available, Mrs. Ellis is available on the 18th.
Oh, wait a minute, Judge,
Would you like later on that week? Later on that week? 21st at 1:15?
I'm good the 19th, Your Honor, the 20th.
What about you, Mr. Lubin? 20th?
You talk about May 20th,
No, June 20th
June 20th?
at 1:15. Does that work for you?
Good.
June 20th at 1:15 for a final status. Please provide me your closing arguments 1 week from today. And like I said, I will have an order out within the next 30 days. I want to thank everybody for their hard work on this case and for mostly the decorum. And, like I said, I understand this is difficult for everybody all around. And I appreciate everybody being here and I want to thank you. That is all.
Thank you, Your Honor. Court is adjourned.